This is part 2, chapter 8 of Mental Health Through Will Training by Abraham A. Lowe. This is called Temper Masquerading as Feeling. Florence on the Saturday panel spoke with surprising candor about her marital life. I was always jealous of my husband, she said. All he had to do was to invite some girl to ride home with us from church, and I became jealous and felt very insecure. Before I joined recovery, I did not know that this was temper. I felt I had a right to ask my husband not to pay attention to any woman but me. But when I got my recovery training, I learned that I was not the judge to decide who was wrong and who was right. Today, I know that when the jealousy gets a hold of me, I feel irritated, but nobody is wrong. I have learned to let the irritation run its course, and it does that in a few minutes. And after my jealousy is gone, I feel good and I feel proud that I was able to control it. In this manner, I endorse myself, and that makes me feel better yet. In former days, when the jealousy came over me, it produced a blurring in my eyes and gave me a headache that would last for days, and my married life was a mess all the time. Today, I have very few of the symptoms, and both I and my husband lead a much happier life than we ever did before I joined recovery. Hmm. Florence suffered from jealousy for many years, but did not know it was temper. That was before her recovery training, and at that time she merely felt insecure. She also felt, this is in quotations, she felt that she had a right to be jealous. I shall ask, who and what did Florence feel in quotations for? The answer is she felt for her own security and her own rights. She showed little, if any, feeling for her husband's security, which was gravely threatened by her jealousy, and for his rights, which were ruthlessly ignored when he was forbidden to extend simple courtesies to fellow church members. And my conclusion is Florence, in her pre recovery days, had feelings for her own dear self the day only whenever the jealousy took hold of her. The feelings for her husband were either absent or feebly operating. Yet the couple had formed a life partnership. They were united in matrimony, and the marital union assuredly called for mutual feelings, for sharing, communicating, and exchanging. Instead, whenever she was in the throes of jealousy, Florence made her feelings flow out toward her own self only. The partner's self was denied its legitimate share of consideration and affection. If the concern about security and the rights was at all the outcome of feelings, they were certainly self-centered and not group-centered. And self-centered feelings, self-pity, self-blame, self-disgust, self-importance, are temper, of course. For you, the member of recovery, this is commonplace and needs no explanation. Florence aimed her jealousy at her husband. Since he was her partner in their marital group, the feeling of group oriented, although in a superficial sense only. But it declared the other person was wrong and oneself was right, and that quality stamped it as unquestionably temperamental. Her jealous temper led Florence to be resentful, sullen, suspicious, indignant, perhaps even hostile and vengeful. All these feelings tie in with jealousy, their main characteristic being that they adjudge the other person as wrong and oneself as right. Excuse me. Though they must be classed among the group directed responses, nevertheless, they are tempers. Many of you remember the time, some 18 months ago, when Florence first joined recovery. None of you realized that she was a jealous disposition. How could you know? She never showed temper when she was with us. She was unfailingly sweet, considerate, patient, and forever willing to be helpful. As a member of our group, she displayed a vast capacity for joy and enthusiasm, affection and forbearance, devotion and selflessness, fellowship and compassion. Needless to say, These were feelings group-centered with regard to their aim, genuine in intent, sincere in application. As such, they were emphatically not temperamental. Her affection had, of course, no implication of somebody being branded as wrong, and herself extolled as right. Feelings of this kind, whose exclusive tendency is to benefit and serve the group, to go by the name of sympathetic responses. They may properly be called the feelings of sympathy. By their very nature, they cannot be suspected as furnishing the material out of which temper is woven. You will also remember that at times Florence appeared in our midst with drawn features and a worn look. Her mood was depressed, and in her depression, we know what we know now was largely the result of her physical ailment. In these periods of depression, her countenance reflected silent grief, a soft resignation, a touching sadness. But there was no wailing and complaining, no self-pity or self-blame. Nobody was assessed as wrong, nobody as right. She just suffered in placid resignation. Feelings of this kind significantly a lowering of a feeling tone from joy to grief, from sympathy to apathy. They are known as apathetic responses and may be fittingly called the feelings of apathy. My opportunities for observing Florence were limited to office, classes, and meetings. I had no occasion to study her behavior in such casual situations as encounters with salespersons and elevator operators, in chats with neighbors and friends, at card games, and on visits to theaters. What was the nature of her responses in these contexts? We know that Florence is a warm person, easily stimulated and eagerly responding. She So we may take it for granted that in most instances her reaction was mainly out of sympathy. Occasionally, more particularly when her severe physical ailments dulled and lowered her receptiveness, her attitude might have been that of apathy. But when an idle salesgirl busy with her makeup kept her waiting impatiently at the counter, when a neighbor was sharp and a friend neglectful, when her bridge partner spoke in a sarcastic vein, and when an unmannered person with tactless remarks and distasteful noises prevented her from enjoying a show, we may safely assume that she was a prey to irritation, annoyance, and outright anger. Under circumstances of this sort, it was more than likely that she was chilled in her sympathy, roused from her apathy, and seized with antipathy. Was this a feeling, or was it temper? The answer is plain. If she was merely irritated and annoyed, it was a more or less unadulterated feeling. If she proceeded to condemn the offender as wrong and to exalt herself as right, it was temper. You will now understand that feelings are of three kinds: sympathy, apathy, antipathy, either toward oneself or others. Temper is one kind only: antipathy, against oneself or the other person, plus the judgment of right and wrong. On the basis of these formulations, we may sum up the meanings of the various reactions displayed by Florence. When she was moved by jealousy, she was resentful, sullen, suspicious, and indignant, perhaps hostile and even vengeful. This was antipathy plus the judgment of right and wrong, hence temper. When she was free from jealousy, she responded with genuine and tolerably genuine feelings of either sympathy, apathy, or antipathy, with no judgment of right or wrong, barring the relatively purity of the responses. This this was feeling without ad- admixture of temper. As everybody does, Florence expressed both feeling and temper. Feelings should be expressed. This does not mean they outright to be acted on or acted out. It merely means that they should be communicated to or shared with somebody who can be trusted to understand them. If the feelings are those of sympathy, their expression will create goodwill and thus further the interests of the group. If they are those of apathy or antipathy, their expression will give relief to the person oppressed by them. Obtaining relief, the oppressed person will be purged of antisocial trends, and the ends of the group will thereby be promoted. This is different with temper. Feelings can be reported, they lend themselves to matter of fact discussions and calm appraisal. But temper, involving a claim of being right, cannot be reported objectively, calmly, or matter of factly. In, in, invariably, it invariably leads to arguments, debates, and rebuttals. Even close relatives and intimate friends asked to pass a verdict on the justification of a temper outburst may and frequently do voice disapproval, criticizing the uselessness and harmfulness of the explosion. If the temperamental person resents the rebuff, a new temper reaction is released, this time involving the relatives and friends. The result is that the temperamental hothead obtains no relief from his tension, and the group life is disturbed. Temper should be checked and controlled. It should not be given any expression at all. It should merely be avoided, or, once it has occurred, it should be prevented from reoccurring. Feelings call for expression, temper for suppression. Florence needed training in recovery to learn that temper is different from feeling. When Why did she fail to make the distinction herself? She was keen, she has a keen intelligence and a refreshing willingness to learn by experience. Her intelligence could have told her that most feelings are noble, that even those that lack the attribute of nobility are not likely to injure the group. But the but by the same token, she could have discovered by sheer use of her native intellect that temper, far from being identical with feeling, is its very opposite. It is positively ignoble and disrupting group life, and should have and she have consulted her past experience. She could have easily learned the fact which I mentioned, that feelings, when communicated, give relief, while temper has no such effect. How is it in her intellect and experience failed her? The answer is that men and women derive their views not merely from their own observations, but mainly from public opinion. The contemporary public opinion has fostered a type of thought which glamorizes temper by the clever trick of identifying it with feeling. The trick is of an engaging simplicity. Temper and feeling, in the present day psychological jargon, are deftly lumped together under the common name of emotion, and emotion is nimbly interpreted as feeling. The next step is in the argument, assiduously promoted by modern psychologies, is that emotions, being the driving power in the human economy, are infinitely more important than intellect. And since intellect is generally considered as a valuable function, the conclusion drawn by the average person and by professionals is that emotions, being superior to intellect, must also be of superior value. With this, emotion is not only glamorized, but also raised to the rank of dignity and nobility. This view, given wide currency by recognized professionals, leading universities, and philanthropic foundations, has found its way into the channels of communication, with the result that dailies, monthlies, radio, film, and television fairly vie with one another in the gentle art of creating an unbridled tempers, carefully avoiding the odious word and slyly substituting the terms emotion and emotional experience. Antisocial impulses born from dark temperament dispositions are then portrayed as just emotions or plainly human, indeed, as a valuable human interest. True, these emotions, read tempers, may also be troublesome. They may cause tenseness, maladjustment, and symptoms. The newer psychologies have wisely anticipated this unfortunate inconvenience and provide a suitable remedy by spreading the gospel of free expression of emotional frustrations and aggressions. That this vicious doctrine of free expression has had a prominent share in the spread of both individual and social tenseness and of all kinds of antisocial trends is plain, but will not be elaborated on here. What interests me at this point is the deplorable fact that my patients have been exposed to the sinister influence of this modern dogma of the identity of temper and feeling and have been reached by the insidious propaganda carried on by textbooks, by the stage, and the press to the effect that ungoverned emotions, read aggressive tempers, can be cured by the expedients of free expression. Well, Florence, under the influence of an utterly irresponsible public opinion, gave formally free expression to her temper and almost wrecked her marriage. Today, when through old-fashioned recovery teaching, she has recovered her mental balance, she expresses her feelings but suppresses her temper. And with temper curbed, her feelings, properly communicated and shared, spread their warmth and glow over the happy marital scene. Okay, that's it for today. Next week or next time, we'll read chapter 9. Tantrums have much force but little feeling. Thank you for joining me.